Okay, let's talk about user interviews. Today I would like to introduce you to some techniques for conducting interviews. Hello product people and welcome back to my channel. My name is Mimi and I'm a UX and discovery coach. I have often talked about interviews on my channel, always more or less assuming that you all know what they are precisely and how and when to use this research method. But since I know from my work that many of you have some question marks when it comes to this topic, here's this video today. User interviews are a qualitative research method. This means that we collect textual data. So in interviews, it's not about counting or measuring anything, but it is about understanding and learning. There are several different ways of conducting interviews, but roughly speaking, it is about having conversations with people from our target group about a specific topic. This loose paraphrase already indicates that one of the most essential points when we conduct an interview is that we first have to determine what we want to find out. This is our so-called research question. By the way, this point also applies to all our other research activities. Interviews can but don't have to be guideline-based, but especially for unexperienced interviewers, it is advisable to have a rough guideline at hand. All you have to do for this is to write down all the questions that you want to have answered in a thematic order, and this way you also have a structure for your interview. If you stray away from your guideline, it doesn't really matter as long as you stay on your actual topic, your research subject. But it is best to mark all the questions that you have already asked to see which ones are still open and to direct the conversation back to these questions in good time. By the way, an interview is all about listening. You should talk as little as possible after the introduction. And when you do speak, it should be your questions that you ask. The introduction is the part of the interview where you explain your counterpart what is happening to them. But go into as little detail as possible about the content of the interview. The questions that you ask during an interview should be as open, specific and non-suggestive as possible. Open and not closed means that they should not be yes or no questions. Vague or ambiguous questions confuse your counterpart and may even make them feel uncomfortable because they are not able to answer a question. And leading questions tempt the respondent to give a specific answer, which can lead to distorted results. There is a difference between your research question and your interview questions. Your research question is basically derived from one of your hypotheses. For instance, we could have the hypothesis that our target group currently needs or wants to save electricity or gas, but has difficulties doing so. Our derived research question could be, what problems and challenges do our users have in saving electricity and gas? Our interview questions help us to answer our research question. Now, we could simply ask our interviewees the research question, right? But then the conversation would probably end very quickly and the results would be relatively meager. Because it is difficult for us humans to answer such a generic question in detail and to consider all the aspects involved. Okay, so we have to approach our research question in smaller steps. What about asking the person if they have any difficulties at all? Because if they say no, we don't need to talk to them any further, do we? So we could ask, do you have any difficulties saving gas or electricity? Well, going in like this can, in the worst case, mean that our results are not as valid as we would like them to be. After all, our counterpart could answer the way he thinks he should answer. No, of course, I don't have any difficulties. We save gas and electricity, yes, we do. This form of bias that can easily creep into our studies is called social desirability. It means that respondents are more likely to give an answer that they assume will meet social approval, because they otherwise fear social rejection. To prevent this from happening, it is first of all essential to establish the so-called rapport. This means basically a pleasant atmosphere where the participant can feel safe and relaxed. Small talk, for instance, is a great way to build rapport. And I will soon make a video where I will go into more detail on this topic. Okay, once we have established a relationship with our counterpart in which an open interview is possible, we can approach our interview questions. Ideally, this will bring us closer and closer to the core of our discussion. For instance, we could start by asking the person what their actual housing situation is. Do they live in rented or owned accommodation? What resources do they draw on? Maybe this person doesn't even use gas for heating, for instance. And we might also find out in this conversation that saving water is much higher on this person's agenda. To find out how a person behaves, so like to find out if they are already saving resources today, we maybe would like to ask something like, how are you trying to save electricity? And here too, we might get biases in our results this way. Because we humans tend to answer questions like these in a way that we would like ourselves to behave. So maybe I would say something like, I now take much care to always turn off the lights when I leave a room. But actually, I don't do that at all. Again, this answer could be put in the category of social desirability, and that although we might have a super conversational atmosphere. So it's better to let the person tell us something without them directly noticing where we are really getting at or what kind of answers we would like to have. Tell us about your day yesterday. How did you wake up and what happened next? And then we listen. The person might tell us that after they woke up, they closed the window and then turned on the heating. And thus we have 2 points where we can dig in deeper and ask more questions. Aha, so you had the heating off overnight. Do you always turn it off at night? Or, oh, you sleep with your windows open. Do you also do that in winter? By the way, it is always better to ask for a specific event first and to validate then if this is the exception or a rule. Huh? What do I mean by that? If I ask a person, how do you usually clean your flat? The answers are usually more generalized and bias is more likely to creep in. If we ask, on the other hand, why don't you tell me about the last time you cleaned your flat? Then we are sure to get a more or less detailed factual report and can ask afterwards, do you always vacuum first or was that an exception? Okay, so you see, one of the top rules of conducting interviews is to follow up. And we do that with the questions why and how. So why did you do that? Or why didn't you do that? And also explain to me again in more detail how you did that. We want to get to the core, to the underlying reasons with these questions. Okay, another important rule is endure silence. Let your counterpart think in silence to come to an answer. And this can sometimes take several seconds, which may feel to you like hours. Only when the other person's facial expression tells you that they really don't come up with an answer, you can rephrase the question or find out what was difficult with your question. And also take your own time to think and breathe. For instance, I sometimes say, now I have to look at my script again to see which questions I have forgotten. And then I take the time I need to collect myself again. Sometimes, by the way, it happens in these quiet moments that the other person remembers something about a previous section. And that's great, of course. One other point is particularly important to me. There is no such thing as a perfect interview. Even experienced interviewers make little mistakes. But you learn from every interview, not only in terms of content, but you can also use every interview to improve your methodology and skills. This works best with interviews that you record because you can then study yourself afterwards and find potential for optimization. Please don't be afraid to do bad interviews. What is the worst that can happen? That you can't use the data from an interview? Well, then that's the way it is. You recruit again. But of course, it is crucial that you evaluate your interviews in an open and unbiased manner and disregard the places where you are sure that a bias has crept in. I promise you, this was not my last video on interviews. Please comment below which aspects of interviewing you are struggling with or want to learn more about. Your input will definitely flow into my future videos. I hope you found this video helpful. If so, please like it, share it and comment on it. This way you help my channel grow and you also help other people find my content. And if you don't want to miss any of my future videos, subscribe to my channel and activate the notifications. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye!